Miles Turner's hands were shaking, not from the cold of the December night, but from the weight of the decision he had made. At 27, he was already too familiar with the underbelly of the city, the empty streets where desperate people made choices that would haunt them forever. Tonight, desperation had led him to the doorstep of someone he had never met, the pastor of a small church in his neighborhood. He wasn't there for prayer or redemption. He was there for survival. Welcome to Shadows of Justice, where crime meets compassion. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, comment, and share. For returning viewers, thanks for sticking to the channel. The house was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a single lamp in the living room. He had observed the routine for weeks, Pastor James's car parked at the side, the lights turning off around 10, the house quiet, the path clear. Miles had a plan. It was simple. Break in, grab whatever cash or valuables he could carry, and disappear. He had been in situations like this before, but tonight a nagging voice inside him kept whispering that something was different. He picked the lock with practiced ease, but as the door swung open, it was the smell of warmth and old wood that caught him first, not fear or tension as he had expected. The living room was tidy, modest, and lived in. Photos lined the mantel, children's drawings, family portraits, smiles frozen in happier times. For a moment, Miles froze, unsure if he was the thief or the intruder who had no right to invade this sacred space. Footsteps creaked from upstairs. Instinct told him to hide, but curiosity rooted him to the spot. Pastor James appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a lantern, his face illuminated with surprise, but not anger. "You don't belong here," Pastor James said softly, his voice steady. Miles felt a surge of shame. He opened his mouth, trying to form a lie, but no words came. He couldn't lie tonight. Not here, not with this man who seemed to see straight through him. Miles started, then stopped. His mind raced with everything he had done to survive, the petty thefts, the broken promises, the nights spent hungry and cold. And then came the confession he had buried deep within himself for years. "I killed someone," he whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. Pastor James's eyes widened, not with fear, but with a deep, solemn understanding. "Come down here," he said gently. "Sit with me. Tell me everything." Miles obeyed. He sank into a chair, his shoulders trembling, the adrenaline of the break-in now replaced by the crushing weight of his own guilt. For over an hour, he poured out every detail, the fight, the accident, the panic that had followed, and the cover-up that had become a spiral he couldn't escape. Each word was a knife in his chest, but also, strangely, a release. Pastor James listened without judgment, only nodding and occasionally guiding him with quiet words. When Miles finished, silence fell over the room. It was a silence that wasn't empty. It was dense with the possibility of change. "You can't undo what happened," the pastor said finally, his voice breaking the quiet. "But you can choose what happens next. Hiding it, running from it, that's not living. It's surviving at the cost of your soul." Miles looked up, tears streaking the grime on his face. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. "You start by being honest," Pastor James said, "with yourself, with those you've hurt, and yes, with the authorities. Redemption isn't given, it's earned, one step at a time." The words sank deep. For the first time in years, Miles felt a strange warmth, a sense that maybe, just maybe, he could begin again. But the road ahead was terrifying. Confessing meant prison, public shame, and facing the family of the person he had killed. But it also meant living without the crushing weight of a secret that had consumed him for too long. The pastor guided him to the phone. "Call the police. Tell them everything. Then come back here. You won't be alone in this." Miles's fingers shook over the receiver. His heart pounded as he dialed, each ring echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. When a voice answered on the other end, he could barely speak, but Pastor James placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, grounding him. By the time the sun began to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the small town, Miles Turner had made the call. He had turned himself in, admitting to the crime he had hidden for so long. The officers arrived, and he went with them willingly. There was fear, yes, but also an unfamiliar calm. For the first time, he was no longer running from the law, from his past, or from himself. Months passed. The trial was brutal, a public unraveling of every mistake Miles had made. Yet through it all, he carried with him the words of the pastor, the image of that quiet living room, and the knowledge that confession had set him on a path towards something greater. In prison, he became known not just for his crime, but for the work he did to help others, from mentoring young men who were walking down paths similar to the one he had taken. He volunteered, taught, and quietly began to reconcile with the family of the man he had killed, seeking forgiveness that he could never demand but desperately needed. Years later, when Miles was released, he didn't walk out into freedom with pride or defiance. He walked out quietly, humbly, carrying the lessons of his past like a cross, understanding that redemption was not a destination, but a journey. The world saw a man who had made terrible mistakes, but he knew himself as someone who had finally confronted the darkness within and chosen, despite everything, to step into the light. The night he broke into Pastor James's house would never leave him, not because of the crime, but because it had been the turning point. The night he confessed, the night he let go of the weight he had carried alone for so long, it was the night his life truly began. Miles Turner had walked into a house planning to steal. He walked out carrying the weight of his own confession, and finally, the fragile hope of redemption. This is Shadows of Justice, where crime meets compassion. Subscribe for more emotional true crime and redemption storytelling, where every scar tells a story worth hearing.